Well, hello and welcome to Let's Talk Change. My name is Debbie, and in this video series, we'll gather around the virtual water cooler where I'm going to be answering your questions around organizational change management. Now, each one of the videos in this series will focus on a specific question. So if you're not finding the answers that you want, I'll show you how to submit your own question, which may later appear in one of these video segments. So today's question is probably the most common question I get from customers. And it looks something like this. Is it really that important to focus on people change? All we're doing is replacing technology or switching to a new process. So not changing is not an option. Look, we're just going to send an email with a link to some training once we're ready for users to use the technology. So let's dissect this a little bit and talk to you about whether it is really that important to focus on people change or not. Okay, the first point I want us to consider today is the ripple effect, right? We're all aware of the adage that for every action, there's a reaction, and that's no different in this case when you're dealing with change in your organization. So the first thing you have are your actions. Now, many times you think of an action and how employees react to that action as how much they're getting paid or what vacation time they have or work-life balance. But actions such as making changes in your organization and interrupting their productivity or impacting their productivity can also have some effects on what they think and how they act and what they do as a result. So one of those implications of your actions is whether or not you're forming trust with your employees and for that matter with your customers, because guess what? The word will get out about how your employees feel about all of the changes that are happening in your organization. So whatever actions you take can either build or kind of take back from the trust that employees have. And as a result, they will talk, right? And they will be sharing their stories about, how change just happens and the organization constantly seems like it's in turmoil and there's no stability and things like that. And that message really gets out to the world, right? There's a lot of websites, social media sites out there where people post what they think about working at a specific company. So it's not just internal. Those actions ultimately tie into how customers feel about you as an organization, right? Which leads to brand loyalty and trust from your customers. And so I think we're all familiar with that phrase that goes something like, never trust someone who's, bad to a waiter or treats a waiter poorly, right? And the same can go true for this type of situation. Again, it's not just a matter of how much you're paying an employee or how many benefits they have or diversity, which is obviously super critical, but it's also those actions that you take on a day-to-day basis, such as making changes. So if there's something that's affecting the people in your organization, the processes, the technologies that they're going to be using, definitely consider, is it really that important then to focus on the people side of change? So in addition to the ripple effect, let's take a look at some actual statistics that relate to organizational change. The very first one, which may seem a little surprising to you, is that almost 3/4 of organizational change initiatives fail to realize the goals they set out to achieve. And when asked why, most of the respondents, I think it was about 75% of the respondents, said it was due to the lack of the human experience focus or the people side of change. Even more so, if you're looking at deploying a new technology, 80% of users admit to using unapproved technologies in the workplace. Very often right now, especially, I'm seeing lots of online chat tools and meeting tools being sent out across the workforce. And there's a lot of tools out there. There's a lot that don't require admin rights. So if you're thinking, well, we have lockdown desktops, so it's not an issue. There's a lot of other tools out there that people use on a day-to-day basis for their personal lives that they can very easily bring into the workplace. So keep that in mind because it does impact your security, your operational efficiencies, and things like that. And then lastly, if you're in that ballpark or mind of thinking of we'll just send an email with a link to some training, keep in mind 90% of people forget what they learn in just 30 days. That's a pretty short time frame. So think about it this way. If you just joined a gym and you walked into the gym and the manager says, "Hey, let me show you how to use all of the equipment that we have." If you go back even the following week, are you going to remember how to use all of that equipment? Will you remember what it's supposed to be used for, when to use it, how to use it, why to use it? Probably not. So training alone is not going to give you the results that you want. Now, the best statistic of all is the next one. Organizations who did have a successful people change management program in place experienced 143% of their ROI. So that's a pretty good number, right? If you're thinking about, do we need to focus on people change? You know what? Look at the pros and the cons and think to yourself, is it really worth, a few more minutes of our time to get even more results than we're setting out to do? When we think about the people side of change or making a change in your organization, look, I think we can all agree change is required, right? Both in our lives, business lives and personal lives, right? It's required for us to survive and thrive, right? If we didn't change, we'd all still be crawling around in diapers at the, age of 35. So I understand change is required. From an organizational standpoint, you absolutely have to keep up with the latest technology and make those adjustments to the new work from home mandates and things like that. But how you go about that change is what's going to inform your success. Because successful change is not just about the change itself, whether it's a technology change or a process change, it's whether or not the people, meaning your employees, are adapting to that change and accepting that change. So a successful change requires not just the what, right, the technology or the process, it requires focus on the people that are adapting to that change. And when you think about it, right now in today's society, we are in change overload, right? From working from home and balancing work and life and homeschooling your kids and all of the new technologies that are landing to try to help us be more productive from home. There's a lot that's happening, not to mention just the uncertainty in our everyday lives. So emotions are high. And this has never been more true than if you turn on the news, right? There are people on all ends of the spectrum. I like to refer back to what we learned in grade school of the fight or flight syndrome, right? People are either really scared or they're really angry, or somewhere in between, but emotions are high. We're human beings, right? And how we react to change is going to vary from person to person. But what is true is that most people don't just automatically change. I love that word, right? Automatic, magically, combined together, automagically. People don't just do whatever you tell them to do. And there's a reason for that. I hear this all the time from companies that, oh, people are just difficult and they don't like to change. Maybe that's true to a degree, but the reality is that our brains are programmed to keep us alive. The way our brains keep us alive is through stability, by saying, look, I need to know exactly what's happening next. This is one of those reasons why emotions are really high right now, because we don't know what's happening next. So don't just assume that because you sent an email telling people to do something, they'll automatically do it. You wouldn't like if someone came up to you and said, you know what, you have to go do this. Right? You'd say, I don't think so. Right? So keep in mind, people aren't just going to automatically do whatever you tell them to do. So whatever change approach you take is going to directly inform the outcomes that you realize. So if you just send an email with a link to training, you know what? I'll bet that your outcomes may not be as high as if you were to spend some additional time on a formal user readiness strategy, right? If you push people to change versus pulling them into that change, right? That approach is going to vary. I actually have an upcoming video on a push versus pull strategy and what that means for your organization. So we'll go into a lot of these details of how and why and when and what in some of those upcoming videos, but really just want to land the point that it is absolutely important to not only focus on what is changing, but who needs to change and how they go about doing the changing, how they go about adapting and accepting the change. Because to sum it all up, and I love this quote, when you think about a technology or a process, it's programmed to act, right? You can write code for a computer and you say, great, if I push A, you're on. If I push B, you're off, People don't function like that, right? You can't push a button and everyone does what you tell them to do. You're going to have people that question, why did you push A? And there are other people that will question, why did you push B? So our natural reaction is to react to any situation. It's our brain's way of processing the information that we receive. So the more you can give information and insights to why you're making the change and how to make the change, the more informed people will be to make the decision that you want them to make. So those are some of my thoughts on whether it is or isn't important to have a people change strategy in place, which I believe it is, but I would love to hear what you think. Use the comments area below to share your thoughts and your experiences or other questions that you may have on this specific topic. And don't forget, I have lots of other videos coming up. I'll be offering some tips for designing a successful people change strategy. We'll talk about a user pilot, user champions program. I even have one that's coming up, which is very timely, on how do you transition an in-person meeting, think along the lines of a team offsite or new employee orientation. How do you transition that from in-person to a virtual experience? So that's coming up next. And if you like these videos, please subscribe to this channel. It gives you front access as these new videos get posted. And if you have a question that you'd like me to consider for an upcoming video, just go ahead to aka.my/question and enter your question there. You'll also see an option to sign up for newsletters and special offers on workshops and coaching and consulting programs that I'll be offering. So check that out at aka.my/question. And if you'd like to learn a little bit more about what I do and who I am, feel free to visit my website at icebergconsultingservices.com. With that, I'm logging off for today. Thank you so much for joining and looking forward to seeing you next time on Let's Talk Change.